Welcome to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm Drew's co-host, entertainment writer Jim Hill, and he and I are recording the show on Saturday, February 19th, 2022. This week was crazy. I mean, things I never thought I would hear about happening, like Brad Bird's ray gun coming back from the dead, or the long-delayed Coyote versus Acme project would actually go forward, let alone a Bloom County animated series. Amazing bits of news. But then you had your trifecta over at the Wrap this week and landed all three of these interviews and got these pieces out there inside of a single week. So let's start with the big one. You got to talk to Lin Manuel Miranda about not only Encanto, but his live action version of The Little Mermaid. And you followed that with speaking to Chris Miller and Phil Lord about episode 6 of Apple TV's After Party, which is animated? Really?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And then to cap that, you got to talk with Dave Wasson, who executive produced the Cuphead show based on the hugely popular game, which debuted on Netflix this Friday, February 18th. We're going to get Drew to talk about each of these interviews on the latter part of today's show. But first, the news. And the news on Fine Tuning is brought to you by Storybook Destinations, trusted travel partner, the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. For a worry-free travel experience, please book online at storybookdestinations.com. And then, just as Drew and I were putting together the show, we had all this Illumination news break.
Yeah.
Not a surprise that we're getting a Despicable Me 4. Chris Renaud, who directed the first two Despicable Me's, is coming back to direct the fourth in the series. Also nice to hear that Steve Carell is coming back to voice Gru, which I think you pointed out, not only Hotel Transylvania, Transformania, but also Ice Age, the
Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. It really rolls off the tongue, Jim.
It does. And this fourth Despicable Me movie should not be confused with Minions: The Rise of Gru, which, after 2 years of delay due to COVID, arrives in theaters July 1st of this year. It's a prequel to the original Despicable Me from July of 2010, but it's also a sequel to the first Minions movie, which July 15th. And speaking of which, did you see they finally have sort of revealed what the replacement for Shrek 4D is going to be at Universal Florida?
Well, I saw our mutual friend Alicia was talking about it being a moving walkway attraction. Is this what you're hearing?
Yes, but did you see what you're moving through, though?
Is it the convention from the first movie?
VillainCon, yeah. In a weird sort of way, it's kind of fitting because remember, in that movie, VillainCon was supposed to be happening in Orlando.
Oh, that's right. In the 60s or something, right?
There we go. So I don't entirely get it, but okay. I guess it creates an Illumination neighborhood, sort of like what they've got at Universal Hollywood with the Secret Life of Pets, the ride across the street from Despicable Me, Minion Mayhem.
Right.
But
listen, you know me, I loved the Secret Life of Pets ride. So if it's anything close to that level and that level of cleverness in terms of mixing screens and animatronics, I'm in, Jim. I'm ready.
Cool.
Put me on the moving walkway.
With this announcement, in between Despicable Me 4 and Minions: Rise of Gru, there's another Illumination film coming that you seem very excited about.
Yeah, there's a new one called Migration, and the official logline is that it follows a family of ducks who, after convincing their overprotective father to take them on the vacation of a lifetime, migrate from New England to the Bahamas by way of New York City. And I'm excited because one of the filmmakers behind this movie also co-directed Ernest and Celestine, which is a very charming French traditionally animated movie from a few years ago. And did you see that both of these movies are being written by Mike White, the creator of White Lotus and the writer of School of Rock and a bunch of other amazing things?
Interesting person to bring to the table.
Yes.
We've got all of these films coming, like right on the money for July 4th weekend for 3 years in a row. But we can't forget about the other Illumination production, which is coming in December this year, right?
Yes, the even more rolls off the tongue, Jim. The untitled Mario film coming this Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
which, if that is not going to be in everybody's stocking, I don't know what is. But that's the one with Chris Pratt as
Mm-hmm.
Mario, Anya Taylor-Joy as Princess Peach,
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Day as Luigi, Jack Black as Bowser, and Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. So,
Mm-hmm. That's a surprising amount of stuff coming out of Illumination.
yeah,
That's kind of the Pixar schedule. 2 a year, then one, the following year, that sort of thing.
yeah,
Interesting. Okay. And again, we've been waiting for a while for a Minion Rise of Gru. It was supposed to originally come out in theaters in July of 2020, but got pushed back due to COVID related production issues. But waiting 2 years, that's nothing compared to how long we've been waiting for a movie version of Ian Fraser's Wile E. Coyote versus Acme Company. Did you ever read the original New Yorker article for
no,
this?
this is one of those things that's there's been a tab open in my browser for about 5 years, and I
Mm-hmm.
have not read it, but I promise I will read it before the movie comes out, which looks like it's finally nearing actuality after all these
Yeah.
years.
This is a piece that ran in the New Yorker back in February of 1990. It was caused kind of a sensation then because it was written like it was a lawsuit. In fact, I pulled a quote just to give you sort of a taste of it. It's like, Mr. Coyote states that on 85 separate occasions he has purchased from the Acme Company, here and in after, known as the defendant, through the company's mail order division, certain products that caused him bodily harm due to defects in manufacture or improper cautionary labeling. Everyone thought, I mean, this is a really funny idea that Wiley finally takes Acme to court because they're the ones who tripped him up from getting the Roadrunner. And so they talked about how would we turn this into a screenplay. In fact, I remember them talking about this back in the mid 90s, where at one point there was some talk about Coyote versus Acme being the follow up project to the original Space Jam, which arrived in theaters November of 96. We jump ahead to August of 2018. Warner Brothers finally decides to get serious about this. They hire John and Josh Silberman. They're the ones who take a run at adapting this for this New Yorker piece and turning it into a full length script for a live action animated hybrid film. Now, Coyote versus Acme is being thought of as a possible follow up for Space Jam: A New Legacy, which the LeBron thing got announced in February of 2014, I want to say, but it still took them 5 years or so to finally get a script they liked and get it before the camera. And Drew gets to hear, and see things a lot earlier than the normal folks. But I want to take a moment here to talk about Space Jam: A New Legacy, where I want to say it was 2.5 years ago, where you were telling me about what you'd heard about Space Jam: A New Legacy, about, the whole notion of it's not just Looney Tunes. It's the whole Warner's IP, as in they were going to bring in Harry Potter, they were going to bring in Casablanca, they were going to be bringing the DC superheroes.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you remember from the early stuff that didn't make it into Space Jam: A
Well,
New Legacy?
I had heard that they were actually going to license Jared Leto's likeness for the Joker, which I don't think ended up happening. He was more in the background, but
Wow.
those were the kind of things, I heard that everything related to Potter was
Mm-hmm.
very kind of, they had to
Mm-hmm.
really finesse all of that. But,
Mm-hmm.
who knows? I mean, there could be that stuff in the movie and you just not even notice it because there's so much
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of
Yeah.
visual noise
Mm-hmm.
in that
Oh,
movie.
I remember when the film came out and did the HBO Max thing, that the people who spent days doing image capture and okay, in the background, that,
Right.
so
Yeah. There were some weird things about that movie. The crowd cycles are very weird because it doesn't look like they were totally matched up to what was going on the court. So you just see characters sort of going like this all the time in the background, and it's like, oh boy, what
But think
happened here?
about that. Isn't that also very much in the tradition of the original Space Jam? Because
That's true.
Oh, I just remember the background animation on that. It's like you couldn't draw more than a 5 second long cycle, and
Oh yeah, and you'd see them all around the stadium. It would be the same
oh,
5
yeah.
characters.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
bad, bad,
Yeah.
bad, bad. But anyway, okay, we were talking Warners, we were talking DC and the superheroes. What intrigues me about Coyote versus Acme is who's now taken on the project. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, well I mean, back I think in 2018
Mm-hmm.
it was announced that James Gunn
Mm-hmm.
was going to be a part of the project, and so
Mm-hmm.
he is producing. Sammy Birch is now writing, and Dave
Mm-hmm.
Green, who did you ever see Earth to Echo?
Oh yeah,
It's a very charming movie that Disney actually made and ended up selling at the last minute to Relativity before release.
Mm-hmm.
But that guy, Dave Green, is going to be directing. And I think, I think we're all very happy to have the John Cena,
Mm-hmm.
James Gunn collaboration continue after. I thought Peacemaker was a real success on HBO Max and is coming back for season 2.
Yeah, but kind of an interesting week for that show in that they announced the second season pickup before the finale, and then what did you make of the final moments of the finale?
Well, here's a spoiler alert. So if you haven't seen it, skip forward a couple of minutes. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm assuming you're referring to the Justice League showing up after the big battle, and not
You're
only
too late. You're too late. You're like,
Jason Momoa and Ezra Miller doing a little cameo there. I knew something big was going to happen because I got to watch the season about, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, but they did not give me the last one. So I said, oh, something must be big in this one. And it really was pretty shocking to see them and their interaction, which is very un-PC. So we cannot repeat the
no,
dialogue.
absolutely. But the thing that intrigues me is like, I think James Gunn was in an interview about the finale, talked about the fact that when it came to the Flash's appearance, all right, correct me if I'm wrong, they shot that in Atlanta at the Marvel Studios complex, right?
Yeah, I think it was well, who knows where they shot it, because I went and visited the set of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and they were in a disused convention center. So they could have been anywhere in the great city of Atlanta. But yeah, he said that Marvel, like that Ezra came to the set and they shot it on the Marvel set, which is just so funny to me. They would let that go down.
That's crazy. Yeah. And speaking of crazy, again, Ray Gun. After all of these years, Brad Bird's Ray Gun is getting made. I've read the script, but you have a physical copy of this thing, right?
Yes, and I think the version that I have is from '96, I want to say.
Yeah, that's how long Brad's been trying to make this, and Brad was going to make it for Turner, right? But then Turner gets swallowed by Time Warner. And Brad's like, well, can I have my movie back? And it's like, no. But if you direct Iron Giant for us and it's a success, as the follow-up, we'll do your Ray Gun movie. I mean, it's in fact, I was thinking the other day, this reminds me of Ron and John.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
There we go. We'll explain.
Ron and John wanted to make Treasure Planet before. I want to say they wanted to do it right after Little Mermaid, right?
Yep, that's what I've always heard. Yeah.
Yeah, so then they get conned into doing Aladdin, and they say, well, your next one can be Treasure Planet, and then they get conned into doing Hercules, and then they finally say, I'm assuming either we're going to leave and do this somewhere else, or we're going to do it at Disney, so they finally let them do it.
Do you think if Treasure Planet had come out either in the Aladdin slot or the Hercules slot, things might have gone differently? Because remember, it opened up against, was it the first Harry Potter movie or the second?
Oh, I don't remember which one. I don't remember that was the case, but that sounds exactly right. I mean, I think a lot of what makes Treasure Planet charming is that mixture of CGI and traditional animation, whether it's all the robotic parts on the pirate or whatever, or that city, that kind of crescent moon city. Yeah. So I don't think they could have done it back then. I mean, I don't know. Rewatch Titan AE, Jim, and tell me what that looked like back then.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Okay, to drop back into the ray gun thing. So again, Brad agrees to this deal. So he starts directing Iron Giant in 97. Movie comes out in theaters August of 99. Underperforms. But remember, it eventually becomes a beloved cult classic. In fact, actually gets to go back and insert film scenes that he wanted to put in originally, right?
Yeah, those are great.
But because Iron Giant isn't a hit, Warner Bros. Doesn't have to honor its deal. To add insult to injury, they hang on a ray gun. But Brad, it works out. John Lasseter calls him. He goes up to Emeryville, makes The Incredibles, and then Ratatouille, and then directs a couple of live action things, right? Ghost Protocol.
Yes. Little movies.
And now I think we do have to talk about the Lasseter part of the story here, because John was asked to leave because certain employees at Pixar and Disney had talked of unwanted advances and hugging, stuff like that.
Yes, he was the real live Lotso. Yeah.
Okay. But in January of 2019, Brad actually defends John. He's doing an interview with the Daily Beast, and there were a lot of gentlemen who were shown the door during this period, and among them was Harvey Weinstein. And Brad, said, look, I don't put John in the same category as Weinstein. I'm an old friend of John's, and I don't see him in black and white. I see him as a person like anyone else. He was a person who was very protective of us at a time when we needed it. So my feelings about him are a bit more complicated, and there weren't a whole lot of people defending John Lasseter in January of 2019. In fact, how long was he there when Emma Thompson walked out the door? She actually exited Luck, right?
Yeah, which makes me think that there was more of a story there because she was in Brave for John Lasseter so many years ago. So I wonder if there was something else there, but she was very public about leaving that production.
So this takes on a whole interesting color because of the notion of Brad defends John, and then here we are 3 years later, and we learn about somebody cut a deal. Warner's let go of Ray Gunn, and after 27 years, is it? Brad's finally gonna get to make this movie, which, by the way, seems to be quite a departure from the family-friendly Luck, and which comes out August of this year, and then the Alan Menken Spellbound musical thing. Do you want to read the story description of a combination of Raiders of the Lost Ark and a Sam Spade movie, right?
Yeah, it takes inspiration from the two genres that were very popular in the 30s, which were detective stories and sci-fi, and that he wanted to meld the kind of Art Deco style of the 30s with the grittier aspects of detective fiction. And the logline, at least from the 90s version, was the last private detective, who is Ray Gunn, hired to investigate the alleged infidelity of a pop singer named Venus Envy. Navigating a world co-inhabited by aliens and humans, Gunn finds that Envy is being set up by her scheming husband to take the fall for the murder of her body double. So I've been telling people it's kind of like his Blade Runner, but even more kind of indebted to the pulpy fiction that he loved and was very popular at the period. But as I was telling you off air, Jim, that Bird is not the last big name in animation that is headed to Skydance, that we will be getting some news about that soon. And also that Bird is kind of rehiring some people that you're going to really love to see on the project.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Matthew Robbins, who from the 90s, Dragon Slayer, and is it Batteries Not Included? Is that his?
Batteries Not Included. I think he wrote some episodes of Amazing Stories, and yeah.
But he works on the original screenplay of Ray Gunn with Brad, and he's coming back. In fact, you've interviewed him, haven't you, Matthew? Or
I've never interviewed Matthew, but I've always wanted to. He also, like me, grew up in San Antonio, Texas, so we have a lot of common ground there. But I actually wonder if they're just going to reuse the same script, maybe just tweak it a little bit and get it going again. We got he's 76, Jim. We got to get this. We got to get this out the door.
Yeah, but Matthew's having quite a year for animation, because didn't he also do the screenplay for Guillermo del Toro's stop-motion Pinocchio, which we're getting from Netflix this year, right?
Yeah, I love that they are like a little creative team. They've worked together a long time since Mimic, I think, and have
Oh my
written a bunch of
God.
screenplays together, including the great Crimson Peak from a
Oh,
few years ago.
yeah.
What a movie.
On the other hand, there is a famous animation test that it's available right now, folks. You can go to YouTube and watch it. Can't guarantee how long it's going to be there, but you have to use the search terms Eric Goldberg and then Opus.
Yes, Opus. Yeah.
Okay, so this is for an Opus movie that was going to be made back in, I want to say this predates 2000. This was during the period where Eric Goldberg, after he directed Pocahontas, he walked away from Disney for a couple of years and was trying to get a bunch of stuff going. In fact, didn't he make a run at Curious George? And I want to say there was a Where the Wild Things Were, too.
Speaking of Brad Bird, wasn't he doing a Curious George at one point too?
That's another one we should probably talk about at some point, because there were so many people who tried to,
Right.
and I got at least 2 different Curious George screenplays in the basement that are all horrible. But anyway, yeah, so you can look at this CG test, which it's Eric Goldberg working computer animation. Do we think it's John Cleese, the voice, or somebody doing a Cleese impression?
It sounds a lot like Cleese. I heard that at the time that David Niven was going to be the voice for the Penguin.
No.
Yeah. This was a version that apparently was being directed by Berkeley too. So I don't know what happened to it, but the test is not great.
No, it is not. And what's interesting is if the stories are true, the one other time they made an attempt at doing a breathed animation with the Bloom County characters, the A Wish for Wings, that worked in 91. In fact, it came like 2 years after the Bloom County strip first shut down. Breathed supposedly hated it. So,
oh, interesting.
Plugging that bit of info in with what you just said about him actually directing the thing. Okay, the reason Drew and I are talking about Bloom County and animation is like, we just got this announcement that Fox Television is collaborating with Breathed himself to come to do a Bloom County animated series. Though I think you were pointing out that the really exciting thing is who's doing the animation.
Yes, it is Bento Box, who we love, who is doing the Bob's Burgers movie right now and a bunch of other great things. And they are really wonderful, and I'm sure we'll do this in that kind of 2D style of computer animation that has become the de facto, I would say. Like, isn't that's I don't think any animation is really hand-drawn anymore on TV, right?
No.
Okay.
But speaking of 2D and CG, we finally got our trailer for Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. And what's cool about working with Drew is he hears things very, very early. And again, this had to be a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, when you first told me about the gimmick for this film, and then immediately said, that's got to go in the vault. You can't talk about it. But Chip it's supposed to at least look like he's in 2D, like from the animated series from the 80s.
Yes.
But the Dale was going to be CG because he'd had the procedure. What did you think after all this time of hearing all of this stuff in a bit? What did you think of the trailer?
It looks really crazy and fun. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, and I said it really brings attention to its own kind of meta-ness in a way that Roger Rabbit did not, because Roger Rabbit is just a detective story where some of the characters are animated. This one is very much like, whoa, we're back. It's here. Whoa, whoa. And it's like, okay, we get it. But Roger Rabbit is there, Jim. So that's...
He is. And share what you've heard about Roger.
I've heard that what you see in the trailer is all that you get of Roger Rabbit in the movie, which is sort of sad. But I think Jim and I have detailed on the show before just how complicated the relationship is with Roger Rabbit, because it is co-owned by Senor Spielbergo and the Walt Disney Company, and that always creates a lot of friction around how and where that character is used.
But some of the detail with Chip and Dale Rescue, some of it is genuinely crazy. I mean, if you go back and watch the scene with Monterey Jack, where they meet up with him and he's talking about his terrible cheese addiction, did you notice that they put him in the very same bathrobe that Jeff Bridges wears in The Great Lebowski?
No.
I kind of love that. By the way, I think the trailer ends with just a 2022, but you were saying we do have a release date for this thing,
Yes,
right?
May 20th, 2022. So this will be your pre-Memorial Day blitz. It'll be the week before Obi-Wan Kenobi starts.
Wow.
Whatever the streaming equivalent of Sweeps is, Jim, I think that
was
must be...
about to say, does Sweeps count in the streaming world?
But Sweeps used to be such a big deal.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they even are a thing anymore. I mean, television, there's new stuff on every week, so I don't know.
By the way, while we're still on the topic of Rescue Rangers, the movie debuts in May, but on March 9th, Mickey's Toontown at Disneyland is closing, and it's scheduled to reopen in early 2023. They're freshening up the land out ahead of the West Coast version of Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway debuting, but Disney Parks revealed just last week that during this year-long downtime, other attractions in the land will be reimagined in new and exciting ways. Goofy's House, Donald's Boat, and Gadget's Go Coaster. So we're going to lose Gadget?
I guess. Do you think it'll be a clone of, what's the one in Florida, the Barnstormer?
Possibly. That would be an interesting way to go. Because I know the fact that Goofy's was a bounce house, and I think, how long has it been since Disney Legal actually allowed anybody to bounce?
It was 6 months later. It was like, nope, no bouncing in this bath.
There we go. But speaking of theme park attractions, just today, I saw 3 different sites doing stories riffing off of your interview with Lin Manuel Miranda, where you got him to talk about how he had talked with Bob Chapek about how there should be an Encanto theme park attraction. We'll get to that story on the second half of today's show.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
Every story you love, every invention that moves you, every idea you wished was yours, all began as nothing. Just a blank page with a blinking cursor, asking a simple question. What do you see? Great ideas start on Mac. Find out more on apple.com/Mac.
Every Who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton. But where to get great prices on gifts, they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one Who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and no prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as Who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
You scored 3 amazing interviews last week. And the first one was the Dave Wasson interview. He's the executive producer of The Cuphead Show, which debuted just this past Friday, February 18th on Netflix. Dave's been a very busy guy for the past 5 years. Can you talk about the show he was working on prior to Cuphead?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little show that you and I never talk about, Jim, which is the Mickey Mouse shorts on Disney Plus, which did the wonderful Winter of Mickey Mouse just premiere?
Also, just same day as Cuphead. Yep.
We got to watch. Have you watched it yet?
I have not, but I can't tell you how many people have sent me the Easter egg where I guess at one point Mickey and Minnie go skiing by a sign for the Mineral King ski area.
Oh my God. That is like the reason we watch these shorts.
Yeah,
They're so
no,
good.
they are.
That is so awesome.
But-
So Dave was one of the kind of founding members of that show. So obviously he's very adept at this kind of rubber hose style of animation and translating things from the 1930s aesthetic to today. Although he very much acknowledges that they use a lot of 50s Mickey in their reference, and they really pull from every era of Mickey Mouse on that show in such a beautiful way.
Yeah. I love you got Dave to talk about what was different about the Mickey Mouse shorts is they told Paul, make them funny.
Yeah, and he said they really had free reign, and it's really interesting because those shows really do push the limit in a lot of ways. I mean, I think the Ghoul Friend episode was the first one that I saw and said, oh my God, these are totally unhinged, and they are letting them do whatever they want, and still seems to be the case all these years later.
Yeah,
so
that's been half the fun of the Wonderful World of Mickey Mouse set of shorts is they get to go longer. And so, that instead of the 3-minute runtime, the 7-minute runtime, and they've done some great, great stuff. But Dave lands the gig on Cuphead, which is kind of interesting because the game debuts in 2017, and wasn't there like a proof of concept or sort of a piece of animation out ahead of the actual game that showed off what they were going to try to do? And, it was like Fleischer back from the dead, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it was all actual cell animation. And Dave told me that he's not a gamer, but he watched all of the run-throughs on YouTube, which I it is a very hard game. I have not gotten very far in it either, but that's how he learned about it. And then he said when he heard that they were making a show, he immediately jumped at the chance to translate it because it's just all the things that he loves. And obviously from Mickey Mouse to this, it's a perfect, transition.
Oh, no, makes perfect sense. But at the same time, the notion that trying to make 3D animation look like 2D, and not only that, look like a very specific type of animation that came from a certain era in the history of animation, and particularly from Fleischer Studios, that was tough.
Yeah, I mean, he described how Harmony works, which is basically a program that is used by all of our favorite shows, Jim, Hilda and Kid Cosmic and all of these shows, and Mickey Mouse. So, they did things like, what I was so amazed by, they put this like drop shadow on the characters to make it look like an animation cell where the light was slightly off and is hitting the cell and creating a shadow. And they put in fake scratches and dirt and things. And he described it as being like a pristine print in the 30s that had just been in a vault somewhere. So it's not like totally scuffed up and like dragged around. It hasn't been playing the revival circuit or anything. It's been in a vault and now it's out and now it is on Netflix somehow.
And what I love is that Dave is clearly a student of animation history because Fleischer was in direct competition with Disney, and Disney introduced Multiplanet. So Fleischer felt like, well, I got to do something like that. And so they did those 3D turntable things.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know you haven't started watching it, have you, Jim? But
on Twitter today, there was an animator who showed off the scene that he animated where the devil confronts the dice guy.
Yes.
And they actually do a sweep around the room 3D thing. And it's this beautiful piece of what looks like 2D animation in a 3D environment that mimics that effect from the 3D stereo sets.
Yes. And if you read the article, I linked out to a YouTube clip of Popeye who's just walking down the street with Sweet Pea. And it's just, there is nothing happening, but it is just the most amazing model work. And I assume it was much easier to do this now, but the fact that they were putting cells up in front of this 3D backdrop while it was moving, I cannot imagine how tough that was, but it was an amazing effect. And the fact that they brought it back for this one, they had to, kind of audition all these animation houses, and one finally said, oh my God, we've been dying to do something like this. So it looks really, really good. And it's in color, which, the Fleischer stuff was not. So it's really cool. You're going to love it, Jim, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Can't wait. But so just about on Netflix, February 18th, 36 episodes total, but we only get 12 now?
I think 12 now. Yeah, they're about 15 minutes long. So they're longer than your typical 11-minute block, but they are not that long. So you can watch a few. I watched almost all of them in a row. So it's really great.
All right, I will do that this weekend. But oddly, a great transition point to our next thing. Chris Miller and Phil Lord's latest project over at Apple TV, After Party, which is a murder mystery, which kind of an interesting gimmick that each episode is done in a different style and done from a different character's point of view. So one episode, for example, was done as a movie musical, and we're now up to episode 6, where Chris and Phil really took a departure, right?
Yeah, this is a almost completely animated episode, and for fans of Mitchell's versus the Machines, which I know there are many that listen to this show, the episode was art directed by the great Lindsay Oliveras, who was the production designer on Mitchell's versus the Machines and was responsible for that great aesthetic that we all fell in love with from the get-go from that movie. So
when they decided to do this show, the idea of doing an animated episode was one of the very first concepts, right? But they then realized that we're going to have to start immediately, right?
Yeah, they were sending Lindsay photos of characters in their costume tests, in their photo tests, and sending them and say, okay, now you can start designing the characters. This is their outfit for the show, because it takes place all over one night.
Yep.
So yeah, it was before principal photography had even started, and it was the last episode to be finished. But the reason why they wanted to do that was that they didn't want to finish shooting and then wait 6 or 8 months to get all the animation back. They were done with principal photography. They started editing the show, and the animated episode came in pretty soon after. So now it can be aired alongside all the others, and it's not we're not waiting 6 months for the animated one or something. So,
but it's still an animated show. You still got to paint the backgrounds. But the thing when you're shooting a live action is you don't lock what the set looks like until it's time to shoot. And so the whole notion of, we finally figured out what the living room looks like. Take a picture and send it to the animators or the background painters. And then just getting the actual vocals from the actors. And then After Party is supposed to be a murder mystery, which means that in addition to animating this, because when you get to the finale, the murder will get revealed. So there also had to be really for real clues in episode 6, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, everybody who's seen anything that Lord and Miller have done, they know that they love Easter eggs and clues, but Chris was very adamant about this, really pointing to who the murderer is. So if you go back and rewatch all the episodes, including the animated episode, those clues will be there. And he also hinted that there could be an animated episode in season 2 and not traditionally animated, maybe stop motion, maybe CGI. There's a lot of possibilities. So check it out.
Okay, can't wait. But again, that's After Party on Apple TV Plus, and new episodes stream weekly. And now, finally, was Lin Manuel Miranda as relaxed as he seems to be in the story? I mean, he really overshares in this in this article, Drew.
Well, I think he found a kindred spirit, obviously, in someone who loves Encanto and all this stuff. And he, off interview, he said, I spent 11 years on Vivo and I spent 5 years on Encanto. So he is just happy to not be behind his desk at the moment. So, he was just feeling good, feeling free. He's got that Oscar nomination, everything's good with Lin Manuel.
Difference between Encanto and Moana is Moana, Lin was brought in relatively late. A lot of the film, had been settled on story-wise, characters, that sort of thing. And he was, came in to work on the songs. Whereas, was it Jared and Byron who credited Lin with actually coming up with the story or the idea of at least the setting of the movie?
Yeah, they had wanted to do a movie about a family, and Lin suggested that it be set in Latin America. And that was it. They were off, and Lin went on the research trip with them to Colombia, and he has been, an integral part of it. He's, he's got a story credit. So I don't think that has happened with a songwriter since Howard Ashman back in the golden era. So, yeah.
Yeah. And remember that Lin has also been working on the live action version, the reimagining of The Little Mermaid that Disney's doing. But he talked about how when he finally got to Disney, one of the very first things he asked for when he was at Disney, there's an hour and a half long recording of Howard talking to the animation team on The Little Mermaid, walking them through the score and explaining why certain numbers are really important or how certain numbers work. And we've only seen little bits of pieces of this. I think there's chunks of it in Waking Sleeping Beauty and even in the Howard documentary, right?
Yes. So Don Hahn has a copy of this, clearly, if they're into both of his movies.
Yeah, and he's got a share.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, he talks about, for example, you in this article, you get him to talk about how, for example, Fathoms Below, the first number in the film, is a head fake because it's not really so much a song as it is how it lays out the world of this movie. You start on Prince Eric's boat and you eventually end all the way down in the, you follow that fish that escapes to King Triton's kingdom, but it sort of establishes the world. Whereas part of your world, Lin enthuses about how that song shows off Howard's skill as a playwright.
Yeah, he talked about how he loved these little moments which are very sort of colloquial, but also really get to the heart of the character. And he said that there was a moment like that in Encanto, which is when Isabella in What Else Can I Do sings, "I'm so sick of pretty, I want something true, don't you?" And he said that kills me for some reason, because it really feels like it erupts out of some deeper place that is not what we've been hearing so far. So, pretty cool.
No, and that's the thing. I love, for example, when he talks about, we don't talk about Bruno, he says, look, that song is a Trojan horse. And if you look at that song, it provides a lot of screen time for characters that haven't necessarily gotten a lot of screen time up until that time. And you learn more about the characters because they're in this song, not just Bruno. On the other hand, can you tell the story about how he discovered Bruno was blowing up?
Well, he said that at the end of last year, he had gotten, Encanto was out. He had finished Tick, Tick, Boom, his movie for Netflix, and that he and his wife just went on vacation, and he turned his phone off, and it wasn't until he came back that he started to realize, oh, this is a thing, because he kept getting emails from old friends who had said, my kids can't stop singing this. And, people who he hadn't kept in touch with reached out and said how much their family was enjoying Encanto. So it was a real eye-opening experience when he got back to know just how big this entire soundtrack really was becoming.
I love that you got him to talk about how We Don't Talk About Bruno is the equivalent of Stephen Sondheim's Send in the Clowns.
Well, he said that, because Send in the Clowns was Sondheim's only number one. And it's not it's a fine song, but it's not like some big showstopper. No. And he said that about We Don't Talk About Bruno. Like you said, it's really a song used to deploy character development and character insight, because there are so many characters in Encanto. It's not a natural choice for a number one song, and yet here we are, Jim.
Here we are. All right. They submitted the musical numbers to the Academy back in November, and the song that Disney submitted for Academy Award consideration was not We Don't Talk About Bruno, but I'm going to bobble the name again. Dos Oreguitos?
Dos Oreguitos, yes.
I got it right. Jim. Hey, yes. Okay. But can you talk about how Lin's okay with this? Again, by way of Moana, right?
Well, yeah, he was very open and honest about the process. And again, they submitted it, like you said, way before it hit Disney Plus and became this cultural kind of like moment. So he said that he wanted to submit a song that kind of sums up the movie emotionally, and that is Dos Oreguitos. But they've been through this Encanto or in Moana, because he was saying, it's very tempting to submit your welcome. You'd have the Rock performing the number at the Oscars in a tux. I mean, how delicious is that? But they went with How Far I'll Go because it's the kind of emotional core of that movie, and he called Dos Oruguitos the heart song, for Encanto, and he's right.
Speaking of Dos Oruguitos, and NPR early this week, Juana Summers interviews Sebastian Yarda. He's the gentleman who actually sings Dos Oruguitos in the soundtrack for Encanto. Sebastian is from Colombia, and he was one of those people who had heard coming out of the D23 Expo that Disney was going to do their first animated feature set in Colombia. And so we jump ahead a couple of months. Sebastian had sung a song that Lin had heard and thought, this is the guy we want to sing this song. And so the story that Sebastian shared was my manager, Paula, called me and said, hey, Sebas, they're calling from Lin Manuel Miranda and the Disney team for the movie Encanto. And I said, I didn't even finish listening. I said, yes, whatever they tell you, say yes. And obviously I said yes. And it's to sing one of the movies, songs of the movie. And then they go into the studio. And initially he sings the song in English and they then sings the song in Spanish. And then they had a conversation about it. Normally it's all right. So the Spanish version that would play in Latin America and the English version will play Northern 48 and but the Spanish version was so powerful and so much more emotional. And they made the call to the effect of, no, this is the version that plays worldwide. Sebastian goes on to say, even if you are listening to the movie in Chinese, when the part with Dos Oruguitos comes in, you hear it in Spanish, which is the first time this has happened in the history of a Disney movie. And again, I love that you got him to talk about the live action version of The Little Mermaid. And
right.
This is a guy who's a huge Howard Ashman fan, and he's working with Alan Menken on new songs for it. So can you first talk about what's going on with the original score?
Yeah, well, he stressed that all of your favorite songs from Little Mermaid will still be there. Mm-hmm. He says that he has contributed 3 or 4 songs. He says, I've heard that the latter is true. So we'll see how many remain in the movie. But he's not in it. I thought for sure he would find a way to make a cameo, much like his Piragua guy from In the Heights, the shaved ice seller. But no, he is not in it at all. He was going to visit the set, but of course, COVID complicated things. And he also said that Alan Menken has seen a rough cut, and Menken approves. So that is always a good sign.
So 3 or 4 new songs. And again, we're not deliberately being vague here. It's because the film isn't locked yet. We don't know if 3 of the new songs are going to make it in or 4 of the new songs, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's still in, I'm sure the puppets are still there. But yeah. Henson made puppets for this movie, right? Did I tell you that?
No.
They created puppets as stand-ins, much like they did for Jungle Book. Much like their crummy Disney Channel Little Mermaid show from a million years ago.
God. Just this week on Twitter, I was watching somebody go off about, you don't understand, Sebastian can't have teeth. In this. I mean, I know what you saw from the original animated from 88 or thereabouts. He can't have teeth. He's a crab. It's not going to work out. So anyway, folks, big week. And again, you did such a great job with all 3 of these stories over at the wrap. Seriously, folks, you got to go over and read the full interview with Lin. Likewise, the full interview with Chris and Phil, and even the one with Dave. You got to watch that or read that before you then sit down and watch, all 12 of the Cuphead shows. Now, I have to admit, the terrific Light the Fuse podcast. You have been on such a crazy run of shows. In fact, you're doing your last set with Mr. Bissell, right?
Yes. Jim Bissell, the production designer behind E.T., The Rocketeer, Arachnophobia, which, going back to our Roger Rabbit story, that is a key part of the Roger Rabbit saga. Yeah, and so you hear, actually, this week, him tell an amazing story about where the kind of like dome that the space guys put over Elliot's house came from, and how originally they were just going to go to a hospital, but they had this kind of last minute change of heart, and he designed this whole pseudo futuristic fumigation tent for Elliot's house. So it's really fun. He's awesome. He's in his 70s and really does not care whose feelings he hurts anymore. And it is great.
I was just telling my sister-in-law tonight that you want to interview people in their 70s because they still remember, you get all the great details, but their filters are gone.
Yes.
You get the very best stories from 70-year-olds. But seriously, if you're not following Drew on social media, well, first of all, you miss out on being among the first to do things like read these great stories he's writing for the Wrap. Can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
Yes. Drew Tailored, like a tailored shirt, on Instagram and Twitter.
Speaking of social media, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media and on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And that's going to do it, folks, for this week. Mr. Taylor needs to go lie down because you wrote 20 articles for the Wrap. And
I had one day off last week and...
relax. And we will be back with a brand new show this time next week. Till then, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.